What is up, Pauper players? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper video. And today we got a very, very cool new deck list from Nick Norman. This took third place in last week's Pauper Challenge, the Sunday Challenge, I believe. And this is a really interesting take on the Turbofog archetype. And as anybody who knows me knows, I absolutely love blue-green Turbofog. I've played Kerblinksi's list. I have definitely been keeping my eye on that archetype. It's one of my most played archetypes in Pauper Pauper, and I am a huge fan of this interpretation of it. What makes this deck super, super interesting is, one, it abandons most of the blue package. Now, how do you mill an opponent out without blue? Well, good question. You still play blue. In this case, we're running a not a full set of gates, almost a full set of 12 gates in the black and green color combinations for the ability to generate both treasures through Heap Gate and just name blue on either Mana or Black Dragon Gate to cast some Stream of Thoughts. But additionally, we're running Campfire, and Campfire is going to let us go ahead and recycle our graveyard back into our deck to avoid milling us out while we lock out the opponent. But contrary to most Turbofog decks, this deck actually has a couple different ways to win the game. You'll notice this single retrofitted Transmogrant up here. This gives you creature redundancy from the graveyard. 4 mana, it comes back as a tap 3/3, and we're running 1 copy of Basilisk Gate. This lets us close the game incredibly quickly. We're also running 3 copies of Crypt Rats, which is our board wipe in this deck, a whole bunch of fog effects, and a whole bunch of draw, including Lembas, and 1 copy of Heaped Harvest, which I actually really, really appreciated in this list. Besides the play pattern of creating treasure tokens through Heapgate to be able to cycle to most of these sacrifice and artifact draws, we also have the ability to pump Crypt Rats so it survives its own triggers to repetitively wipe the board while dealing damage directly to our opponents. And then we can also use Basilisk Gate to just attack, which does happen quite a few times in my test games over the week. But the exciting part about this deck is that Turbofog is a very known strategy, and it's pretty easy to target the graveyard to limit their redundancy. What this deck does to counteract that isn't bring in extra counter spells or anything like that. It brings in 4 Brute Scales and 4 Glee to become a combo deck using 2 copies of Nidier's Nightblade to win the game on the spot. So especially in MTGO where clock management is super, super important, not only can this deck win quickly through Basilisk Gate triggers once it's turned the corner, it also has a combo kill out of the board if needed. Super, super cool, really interesting take on the archetype, and let's jump right into the games. All right, game number 1. This is match number 1 against Chess and Magic. Unfortunately, we do lose the die roll, so we are going to be on the draw. Let's see what the opening hand looks like. This is a lot of land and not really much to do with it, but we do have a few different redraws, so it's certainly reasonable. And we're going to go ahead and see how this goes. Now, Jagged Barons immediately tells us we're up against Rakdos Madness, which is definitely a popular deck right now. The adding of Grab the Prize has certainly spiked this deck again, and it's consistently gotten solid card additions over the last few sets, so it's certainly more powerful than it ever has been. This isn't the ideal matchup, but it is quite a good matchup, I think. I think to make this a better matchup, we'd have to look at that main board split of just having 2 copies of Weather the Storm and 1 copy of Reprieve. I think that perhaps one of those fogs or one of those darknesses in the main board could take a hit for a 3rd Weather the Storm and really put this matchup over the top. We do have a 3rd one to bring in from the board, thankfully, but the main board does suffer a little bit against direct damage. It's very tooled against Mono Red Kuldotha in that respect, where creature boards are definitely going to struggle, but direct damage isn't. A little bit of a weird kind of nombo there. But as we see this game develop, it goes fairly slowly. The opponent's milling through a whole bunch of cards with discard effects, generating some blood tokens. Puts us down to 9 before we really have a chance to start to stabilize and take over the game. We do have this Crypt Rats in hand, which is pretty nice. We've got a whole lot of mana up. We do have some life gain. We're just going to discard some lands here down to hand size. Opponent has 5 damage at the Dome for 3 mana. Grab the prize Fiery Temper, which is very unfortunate. 5 damage for 3 mana plus 2 cards makes Flame Javelin look like a joke. We do have several turns of Fogs lined up, though, plus Crypt Rats to wipe the board if we can find a way to gain some life. We're going to go ahead and Bojuka Bog the opponent just to take out that Faithless Looting, play an extra blocker so we can block this Epicure to trade. And the opponent is definitely looking for some action, starts to discard a whole bunch of Sneaky Snackers, which I wasn't really expecting, since we saw none in the first, like, 15 cards of their deck. But at the end of the day, we still have several Fog effects. We have a Moment's Peace in the yard and 1 in hand, so we're not really worried about the Sneaky Snackers. It's really just going to come down to whether or not we survive the direct damage. We go up to 10 life. Certainly a reasonable life total to be here, especially when it looks like they have a very board-centric hand. We're going to go ahead and pop this Crypt Rats, wipe the board, and we do have a flashback of Moment's Peace or regular Moment's Peace if we need it. Opponent's going to put us at 1. Not much we can do about this, though. Unfortunately, they have the other Alms of the Vein, which does wrap up this game. We're going to go to sideboard and see what we can do about that. Reasonable showing for this deck in Game 1 against Rakdos Madness. This is definitely one of those weaknesses I was talking about where you just don't draw Weather the Storm, and that's definitely a problem. Reprieve would have helped here, but as a 1-of, that's pretty unreliable. So let's go to sideboard and see what we can do in game number 2. Alrighty, game number 2. This is a pretty good hand, albeit a little bit slow. We do have a 1-mana Fog and a Weather, though, so that's definitely something to keep. Let's take a quick look at the sideboard plan here. We're not bringing in the combo because they're unable to get rid of enough creature removal to really make the combo reliable with no protection and no recursion. So we're not really going to count on this. This is mainly for matchups where either time is going to be super relevant or more specifically, we expect them to be siding out all of their creature removal. So what we did do is we took out 1 retrofitted Transmogrant, apologies, and 1 Moment's Peace, and we brought in the other Nadir's Nightblade and the other Weather the Storm. We do have a lot of token generation in this deck, and that extra life gain does help. We didn't bring in the extra Crypt Rats. I don't think we need it, to be totally honest, in this matchup. Oftentimes, they're just doming us, and they only have a couple creatures on the board, so the board wipe's not going to come in super clutch very often. We are going to go ahead and keep this hand, though, and we're going to run it. You'll notice that both black and green mana production in this deck is pretty smooth, which is super, super nice. That's just the flexibility you get from the gates instead of something like Troll with the typed duels. Although that would work as well, it's a little weaker to something like Ponza. Fortunately, that's not super popular at the moment with red being so big. We draw this Stream of Thought. Now, mostly Stream of Thought's going to be casted off of treasure tokens and gates naming blue, or just heap gate filters in general. We're able to land an early Campfire, which is great, but the opponent has an early Exile, which does definitely put in a little bit of work here. We are able to gain 2 life off of it. We immediately draw a second one, which is great. We're just going to Deadly and play another Campfire. We do have the treasure token to tap it if we need to, but we would like to hold that. Gonna go ahead and Heaped Harvest. Really looking for a land drop here and just missing a couple of times, which is unfortunate, but being able to Deadly this Heaped Harvest is definitely going to put us back into it. Opponent coming out of the gates with a couple Grab the Prizes, couple Fiery Tempers, Alms Divine, definitely putting in some pressure, but this Campfire is doing a ton to keep us in a reasonable life total to be safe. There's our land drops, which is great. We do have Weather the Storm in hand still, so we know we're pretty safe. Opponent goes for the Galv Blast. We're just going to go ahead and Campfire through it. Discard an Eviscerator's Insight. The flashback on that is super relevant, which is nice. Opponent does go for another Galv Blast on their turn. They had 3 in hand, so we are going to Weather the Storm after the second one, just to stay above 10. They have an Alms of the Vein, which would have killed us, but they wouldn't have been able to cast it at instant speed, so we could have gained 3 extra life there if we would have waited. But I didn't want to take the risk with them having so many cards in hand and maybe being able to just bolt us in response or something. Seemed like a risk not worth taking, especially with a Campfire out, and really just a way to outlast their damage potential if we just keep taking turns. Hitting another Weather the Storm there was huge, though, because now we are super duper safe. It's just about building up a big Weather the Storm here. We're going to go ahead and take this 4 storm count, and the opponent just scoops it up. Super clutch there. Did definitely not need the second Stream of Thought. Brought it in just in case they bring in graveyard removal against us, but certainly this could have just been the Other Moments piece back in, and I don't think that would have been a mistake either. At the end of the day, once we hit Creature to stick with Basilisk Gate, we're going to be able to close the game, so we can definitely start using the Transmogrant. If the opponent does bring in Graveyard Hate, it's good to have the second Stream of Thought, just so we can loop it in the endgame if we need to, but that's all for game number 2. Let's take it to game number 3 and see who takes down this first match. All right, side plan is the same as it was previously. We don't actually make any changes. This is a perfectly fine hand. We lead on a Campfire, which is great for us. We don't have double color yet, but the Heap Gates will help with treasure tokens. Tangle and Fog should do a lot to buy us some time, and we're going to run it like this. Opponent does mull down to 6, which is definitely a disadvantage for the deck that needs a whole bunch of cards to really start to generate some value, but Vampire's Kiss with blood tokens is definitely going to do a lot to dig them out. We're just going to lead on Olympus. Reckoner's Bargain is big here just because it can gain us 2 or 3 extra life, which is nice while we try to smooth out our draws here. We do hit Deadly, which is awesome, and we're going to be able to lead on Campfire. Opponent does have the Cast into Fire. Now, we're just going to go ahead and Deadly Dispute this instead of tapping it for 2 life. That could come back to bite us, but I think the option of trying to draw for more and hit a Weather the Storm is definitely the way to win this matchup most times. We're just going to continue making land drops. Respite is a reasonable card here. If the opponent does try to go for another wide, like multiple sneaky snacker board here, Respite's going to do some work. We are now almost 20 cards into our deck. Still haven't seen a Weather the Storm, which is a little bit upsetting. Definitely going to need those to clutch out this game. The Respite's not going to do much for us, but we still have Deadly on this Wellspring. We're going to have lots of card draw still. We still have a Fanatical Offering behind this. We're going to draw more Lembosses, and there is finally a Weather the Storm. So we are pretty stable here at 7. Opponent does have 5 cards in hand, which is terrifying to say the least. But we are just going to continue drawing as much as we possibly can. We're going to go ahead and Weather for 4 here. Opponent only had 1 mana available, so we knew we couldn't die in response, and that way they're not going to be able to kill us in response to a Weather on their turn. So we just go ahead and take the Storm triggers there. We do have Campfire to develop next turn, which is definitely going to probably seal the deal on this game. Nadir's Nightblade is an interesting draw here. We have a map token in play, so we're just going to get some incidental life gain and also force them to use something like a Galv Blast on the Nightblade. This time we do just cash it in for 2 life. They have another Cast into Fire that they saved for the Campfire, which is upsetting. We're just going to go for the Basilisk Gate. They do have to spend 2 burn spells to kill the Nightblade, which was the plan. Love to see that. That's a ton of damage out of their hand that we no longer have to worry about. And now if this Crypt Rat sticks, we are going to be able to continuously wipe the board and probably nuke them over 1 or 2 turns here just by making it like a 6-6 or a 7-7 and then triggering it for a bunch of damage additionally. We hit a Stream of Thought, but with 38 cards and not a ton of blue mana sources, it doesn't really seem like we're going to be able to make that plan happen, so we're going to hold this as a backup plan and really just go ahead and commit to this Crypt Rats. We do still have a couple of Fogs. We are down to 10, so we are a little bit at risk here, but the opponent is now out of cards, which is fantastic. We're going to go ahead and just dome them for 7 here. We are pretty close to lethal through just black mana in general after a second attack. The opponent top decks a Kitchen Imp. That's fine. We're going to just cash in this Reprieve. Don't see this game going any wider than it currently is. Double Fog is definitely going to tilt the race in our favor. We're going to pump up this Plant token. Could have certainly pumped up the Crypt Rats, but didn't want to incentivize killing the Crypt Rats here. We're going to make them spend a removal spell on the plant token if we can help it and just win the race this way. This is going to put them to 8. Unfortunately, we're 1 black off of being able to kill them in that scenario, so we do have to delay 1 more turn, but double fog, 1 card in hand. There's not really any combination that the opponent can come up with that kills us from here without an insane Faithless Looting, and we do have a Lemboss on board, so we're safe there. We're just going to go ahead and draw cards to ensure we have the game here. Opponent did have a Lightning Bolt to kill the plant token, so they are going to take it a little bit longer. If we hadn't tapped that extra black, we do just win there. Could have definitely just used 2 colorless sources in Basilisk Gate instead of 2 swamps and won the game. That's a mistake from me. But I think the writing is on the wall here. Opponent's still at 1. We're going to go back up to 14. We do have a Reckoner's Bargain to gain 3 if we need it. Opponent does have the Lightning Bolt to stop the Basilisk trigger, but we're just going to put a 7 damage trigger on the stack and win the game there. So we take down the match with Crypt Rats. There was some time to worry about here. We were just about at 5 minutes on the clock, but able to play a full 3 games on a Turbofog deck with time on the clock and not in the red. Definitely an improvement over previous iterations on MTGO without incredible micromanagement of your clock. So really, really liking the adaptation here. Let's go ahead and test this against one of the most popular decks in the format for match number 2, Mono Red. And if you are enjoying these games, if you're enjoying these deck highlights, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. It really does help us grow and in general just spread the reach of the channel by liking, commenting, maybe suggesting it to a friend if they enjoy Pauper content. So always happy to have more players in the community. Let's jump into match number 2. This is against K-Towers 08, and I believe they are on Koldatha Red. We win the die roll, so we are going first, and this is definitely the deck that we are here to target, so let's see what our ideal matchup looks like. Unfortunately, that is a mulligan, but this is a pretty solid hand. We are going to be able to create a treasure token in Deadly. Unfortunately, it doesn't go very fast, and it doesn't have any 1-mana fogs, which may or may not kill us, but let's run it like this and see what happens. We're just going to start out on a gate, which is pretty much our standard. Opponent on a Blast Runner, which is not the best run out for them, which is nice for us. We do hit a Weather the Storm, which is super clutch on that draw there. Opponent is going to just hit us for 1, so we have a little bit of time. They spin a Chain Lightning, which is fine. They may or may not think we're on Gardens at this point. It's really difficult for the opponent to tell we're on Turbofog until they see something really weird like a Respite or a Moment's Peace. We're just going to lead on a Deadly Dispute, hitting more land drops. We do have Weather the Storm up in case they go for a really big combo turn. They do just Lightning Bolt us at end of turn. We could have cashed the Weather the Storm there, elect not to. Really just trying to play around a big, like, synthesizer turn from the opponent or something like that. We are telegraphing a little bit that we have some action in hand. Opponent does go for a Lightning Bolt there to put us at 6. They're at 4 cards, so there definitely is the chance that we're dead. We do have to Respite here, which isn't the greatest, but it does put us at 9. We still keep this Weather the Storm in hand, and we're going to be able to wipe the board here and keep Weather the Storm up, which I think is great. We're just going to make sure they're not going to rebuild the board right after, or at least attempt to. We do just go ahead and pop it. Go down to 7, which isn't a number I'm super happy with, but at least we're able to get this Weather the Storm off for some extra storm count. Nadir's Nightblade does help us stabilize here a little bit, but I think Reckoner's Bargain is probably going to be a better line, unless the opponent had a really explosive turn there. Luckily they didn't, so we are able to just commit a little bit here. We're going to Reckoner's Bargain for that extra land, play a Limboss. We're going to hold this Moment's Peace up. And really just kind of make the opponent make something happen here. They haven't really done much. We are back up to 19, so we are at a perfectly safe life total with this Weather the Storm in hand. Very difficult for the opponent to present us with something we're not prepared for at this point. We're just going to boom the Crypt Rats again. Wipe the opponent's board once again. They're at 5 cards, so we are going to make them rebuild. Could have waited until their next turn, but they've obviously demonstrated the ability to attack first, then rebuild in the main phase 2 already, so we're just going to assume that they would be able to do that correctly this time. And fortunately, with Moment's Peace and Weather the Storm, we're pretty safe against, like, Bushwhacker plays, so not much to worry about there. Transmogrant is going to represent our inevitability. We're just going to go ahead and replay this Eviscerator's Insight from the yard with flashback after making a treasure token. Go ahead and Basilisk Gate here. They have to burn a Galvblast on it, which is fantastic. We do just get to reborn this at the end of the turn if we want. And we hit a Campfire, which is fantastic. So now with Campfire in play, Weather the Storm in hand, Moment's Peace in hand, we are well and truly safe from anything the opponent can really put us up against. Hard to lose from this situation, but at the end of the day, we are down to, I think, only 1 Crypt Rats left in the main board, so we would have to Campfire if we need to draw more of them. Do need to be a little bit careful about the opponents showing up with a stable board, but we're just going to cash in this Weather for 15 life here. This will give us tons and tons of time with multiple Moments Pieces. We have 1 in the yard and 1 in hand. And we go ahead and bottom another one because we certainly don't need the extra help at the moment. We're just going to Fanatical Offering, and we're going to do a similar thing we did against Rakdos and put the 1/1 counter here on this Nightblade. Make them burn 2 spells to kill it, and it's a solid blocker. They just rebirth the Percussionist, which is fine. Again, we have Moments Pieces to work with, so we're really not at risk here, especially with a Campfire in play at 32 life. There's not a ton the opponent can really do to threaten us without, like, main board Flaring Pains or something like that, and I certainly don't expect to see that from Kuldotha Red at this point in the meta. So we're pretty safe. It's kind of all but over here. It's just going to be a matter of outlasting the opponent and really fighting them through. Worth noting, we are much lower on time than we would like at this point. We're down almost 3 minutes, so, or almost 4 minutes rather, so we do need to keep an eye on that, hoping that doesn't come back to bite us, but it is definitely something to watch for when playing any Turbofog list on MTGO, definitely. Here is that big combo turn we were originally waiting for. The opponent finally commits to some synthesizers and starts to pop them. They do rebuild this board fairly well, so we are going to need a Crypt Rats to really seal the deal here. Especially with these Vigilance annoyances, because it prevents us from swinging back with a Basilisk-gated creature. But that's kind of fine. We do have a lot of time still. Second Campfire, and they don't have a removal spell for this, so they're going to go ahead and scoop. I think they see the writing on the wall. They know we've turned the corner here, and so do we. So we're going to go off to game number 2. Let's sideboard it up and see what we can do. Alrighty, game number 2, we're on the draw after taking down game number 1 against the Mono-Red Menace. This is a very solid hand, so we're definitely keeping this out of the sideboard. Very similar plan to the last sideboard. We took out double Stream of Thought, or we took out 1 Stream of Thought, 1 Eviscerator's Insight. We brought in the extra Nightblade and the extra Weather the Storm. No reason to bring in the combo here. Again, all of their burn stays in against us, so there's no reason to think that they would sideboard out a bunch of creature removal, which makes this the ideal package to win instead. That is a time consideration, though, so if we don't win this game, we may have to make some interesting sideboard decisions just for time. But we are going to go ahead and keep this, and let's see how we go. Opponent has another reasonable start on a 1-drop, but not the worst 1-drop for us. No Tomb Raiders. And we top deck a second Weather, which is actually massive. So if we can set up a reasonable Weather turn here with 4 mana, we're certainly going to be able to take this game real long, real quick, especially with a Crypt Rats. We're just going to go ahead and tap the Campfire, go ahead and gain 2 life here. Pass to save a little bit of time. Opponent has a Bushwhacker to kick, which is a little bit annoying. Definitely puts a lot of pressure on us quickly. They have a Kuldotha Rebirth into a second Bushwhacker, which is pretty brutal. We are going to be able to go ahead and Weather the Storm here, which is going to keep us from death, but Not by much. We're going to go down to 6 here. Really looking to deploy the Script Rats. We needed an untapped black source there, or just an untapped land in general, and we would have been fine. But the opponent has what is a pretty explosive start here into triple Bushwhacker, which puts a lot of pressure on us and is able to just kind of get through Double Weather and Campfire by keeping the spell count low. So we're going to take this to a game 3. Didn't have to spend a ton of time there, but we are still about 5 minutes down on the clock, so certainly need to keep an eye on that. Fortunately, 14 minutes should be plenty to play a final game here. Let's go ahead and run to game number 3 and see who takes this match. All right, we're on the play this time. And once again, this is sort of the deck we're here to target. So if we can't take down those explosive starts from the mono red deck, then we're really not in a great place. Same sideboard plan as before, no changes there. This is a pretty solid hand. We do have double Moment's Peace, which is really kind of what we needed against that last run out from the opponent. We needed a Fog or a Darkness or something like that. We just never found any. We found Double Weather instead. This looks perfectly fine to me. We're going to go ahead and run it. Start with a blocker, and we're able to deploy Deadly Dispute and Wellspring pretty quickly. Hitting a Reckoner's Bargain is pretty good there. Opponent just puts us at 1. Doesn't have a super explosive start and looks to be on 1 mana only. We do hit an untapped land, which is pretty good for us there, and a 1-drop, so we do have some blockers available, which is great. Transmogrant is definitely our eventuality if they didn't bring in relics. So we love to see that early. Opponent has another big goblin-wide start, but doesn't have a Bushwhacker yet to really put that pressure on with that combo draw. Did hit a land drop, though, so they're a little bit unlocked in that regard. We're going to go ahead and leave Moment's Peace mana up. Opponent just commits to an attack for 5, 6 here. We have 1 mana. We're going to preserve this treasure token as much as we can. And Wellspring, we do have Deadly and Moment's Peace up again if we still need it. Opponent goes for a little bit of burn, but doesn't have a huge burn hand. Maintaining a large card hand, though, so they are able to redeploy. They know we have Crypt Rats, so they're probably slow playing a little bit just to make sure they don't overcommit, which works out for us because it does force them to give us time, which is great. We tap out, so the opponent does go for a Galv Blast there, but that's fine. We hit a Campfire and a Weather the Storm, and now with a Moment's Peace in the yard and a Moment's Peace in the hand and lots of draw actions, we are going to be okay from this point, I think. We're no longer in heavy danger. We're going to go ahead and flash back the Moment's Peace just in case they do rip a relic. We don't want both in the graveyard at the same time. We're going to go ahead and Campfire. The opponent puts us down to 7 with the Campfire trigger. But that's okay, honestly, at this point. We're doing okay. There's the Crypt Rats. Unfortunately, we miss a land drop, which is pretty brutal. We needed the land drop there. Could have just popped the Crypt Rats and left them with a Blast Runner and a Tomb Raider, but didn't want them to rebuild with 3 cards in hand and put a bunch of pressure on us that we couldn't deal with. So Respite gains us some life there, which is fantastic. Takes a lot of the pressure off. We're just going to start cashing in this Campfire over and over, and we did hit the untapped land we needed for this Crypt Rats to wipe the board with Weather Storm open, which is exactly what we wanted. Now the opponent's down to 2 cards. We're just going to tap this Campfire and pass the turn to save some time. 9 minutes on the clock should be plenty to finish out this game, though. We do have the Basilisk Gate yet to be found, but that's okay. We have lots and lots of draw left in the tank. Double Weather the Storm should all but clinch this, though. We're going to spend Deadly Dispute and go for a Weather the Storm here, into a Weather the Storm here to just gain a huge amount of life and put a massive cushion on us so we can go ahead and pass the turn. Opponent with 3 cards in hand, not likely to really commit to a huge storm count larger than that, so we're just going to go ahead and use what we got while we got it. A handful of Fogs, a Reckoner's Bargain, so we are able to create a treasure token and sack it to Reckoner's Bargain if we need to just keep the draw chain going. But opponent is not presenting us with much of a clock. 2 damage a turn is not what they need. So we're just going to Eviscerator's Insight from the yard. We hit a Nightblade, which is fantastic. That's certainly going to give us a creature to block with and to start generating these treasure tokens with, which is kind of what we needed. Some way to start hitting them for damage. We do just go ahead and block. We're going to start making some treasure tokens here. And they go for the Gallblast in response, so we're going to go ahead and crack it just to gain a couple of life. We'll still have a treasure token when all of this resolves, but that's fine. The first one dies. We do still have a second one, and we can get back the retrofitted Transmogrant whenever we want. We've just been using our mana pretty efficiently, so we haven't had time to bring that back. But now at this point, we've definitely got the pressure off, and we can start bringing that 4-4 back, or 3-3 back, sorry, to block. While we continue to cash in on the campfire, we have all of the fogs in the world in hand, so we are under absolutely no combat pressure. But the opponent's really not really doing much, just hitting us for 3 a turn, so no reason to really fog those out. Tangle does buy us double turn, though, so we may cash that in just to avoid hand size complications. We're really just looking for that Basilisk Gate at this point. 23 cards left in deck. We're going to go ahead and burn some of these cards out of our hand, just so that we don't have to worry about hand size. And similar story, we're going to go ahead and just attack, tapping our campfire on our turn so we can F6, save a little bit of time. Once again, we do have to be a little concerned about this at this point, because we do have to turn the corner here and actually close out the game, and they are able to present a whole bunch of blockers for Kuldotha Rebirth or something like that. We don't have any evasion-y threats to get through. We just have some kind of resilient threats to present with this Basilisk Gate. We hit another campfire, which is pretty nice for us. We're definitely out life gaining their damage at this point, or at least breaking even at 40 life. The opponent with 2 cards in hand really not going to ever present lethal threats here from us. So that with the Weather the Storm in hand, plus Fog, plus Moment's Peace, plus Tangle. I mean, we got it in the bag. We just need to top deck this Basilisk Gate to really close out the game. Down under 5 minutes, so we do need to start picking up the tempo here. Maybe hit another creature or a Crypt Rats to start to wipe the board so that we can make sure the opponent can't really block us out. We hit the map token onto the retrofitted Transmogrant to make it a 4-4. Now, this was marginal, but it does make them a little more likely to have to burn it out additionally. We get it back immediately, so the extra token could have definitely gone on the plant, so it blocks better. That was a small misplay. Opponent has Fire Blast for the Transmogrant. They're really trying to play the timeout strategy here, I think, just presenting a bunch of blockers for a 3-3 and chipping us down from 40, really stressing the clock now. So we had to play pretty quickly, a little bit sloppy, if I'm honest, missing some end-of-turn triggers on heap gates and things like that just to avoid clock. But there's the Crypt Rats we needed, and we're actually remarkably close to just doming the opponent for lethal outright. We do allow them to block here. That's okay. We're trying to just untap and boom the Crypt Rats for lethal, but they do hit the Lightning Bolt off the top, which it's a little unfortunate, but that's fine. We're just going to funnel a whole bunch of mana into this Crypt Rats and pop it to wipe the board. And we're going to leave just enough mana up to get the Transmogrant back at the end of turn anyway. So we go ahead and do that, and then they go ahead and scoop up the game with no cards in hand. Wasn't technically dead on board, but I don't think they thought they could win from there and weren't going to make us timeout. So GG's to the opponent. K-Tower played well, and this deck definitely showed its potential to shut down those aggressive decks in this meta. So if you are sick of playing against mono red and you really want to just shut them down and shut them down hard, this may be the deck for you. Let's jump back to the recap. All right, so this week's deck was by Nick Norman. This was green-black Turbofog, or black-green Turbofog. It was a ton of fun to play throughout the week. Really like the idea of the deck change sideboard, although we didn't showcase it in some of these feature matches. I did it several times over the week of testing and through a couple of different leagues. It did matter quite a bit to save the clock. You saw even against mono red, we were getting a little bit low on our clock at the end of game 3 if they just kind of take it slow against us. So it does definitely come into play to save clock in those game 3s, those crucial game 3s when you need it. Other than slight optimism, I think you could probably cut the second stream of thought for a 4th weather out of the board, or maybe cut the main board Stream of Thought for a 3rd weather in the board. Maybe you could just cut the Darkness outright. I never really needed more than one of those 1-mana fog effects for a 3rd weather. Something like that, just to add a tiny bit more life gain into the main, apart from the food sacrifices. Other than that, I really, really liked the deck. I think the Basilisk Gate tech was super helpful. I think the retrofitted Transmogrant was a great persistent threat. I really liked the angles this deck can attack from. And I love the deck change sideboard. It's just super, super creative. Pyroblast was helpful. We did play against a mono blue Terror deck as well as a blue-black Terror deck. I will say the addition of the Monarch from Blue-Black Terror made this deck very, very hard to win that match. So Blue-Black Terror definitely felt like a bad matchup for this deck. Do not advise if you are expecting to see a bunch of those. But other than that, thank you so much for tuning in this week. I hope you enjoyed the feature matches on this deck. Super interesting take on Turbofog, and I hope you enjoyed it. I will have the deck link down below if you want to import this and try it out for yourself. As usual, guys, thank you so much for watching. Good luck in your leagues, and goodbye forever, unless I see you next time.